Can you hear me now?
I can indeed hear you now, Sam. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, I cannot complain in the slightest. I'm going to Cyprus on Wednesday, so this is going to be probably my last stream from my PC desk at the very least, because I'm taking my stuff with me to Cyprus to be able to stream from there if I can. Um, so that's going to be fun. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Just applying to some jobs actually. So definitely have homelessness on my brain. Although I always do because I
True, I
don't
mean,
know what work-life balance is, but
that's true, that's
you
true.
know.
And obviously, it's been a big part of your life, whether it's been the situation that you've been in, or if it's been something that you've been actively involved within the charitable community with regards to that.
Yeah, it is
No,
definitely a thing I do.
true, true, true. So do you want to let everyone in chat know? I mean, you can. I mean, you don't have to tell them who you are, but what you do, and where you got to where you are.
Sure. I'll just say my name's Summer. I'm not really too concerned about that. Right now, I serve on the leadership council of the homeless response system in my city, which is essentially the central governing body over all organizations that receive HUD funds. So basically, funds from the federal government, as well as city funds. We do oversee things outside that purview, but we have a little less teeth there. So it's
Hmm.
not, it is kosher to say we oversee the system as a whole, but it's how much, power we have uh, gets a little murkier when we get towards like religious organizations and churches who do work. But um, yeah, I sit on the leadership there. And this was after having myself experienced chronic street homelessness on and off for a span of, sorry, I never remember the number. So from 17 to 23, so 6 years.
A long
Um,
time.
not Yeah, not that entire time, obviously, and some of that was also like couch surfing. So it wasn't all on the street, and I wasn't homeless in any regard for some periods of it. But so I definitely bring a few angles when it comes to homelessness, uh,
Yeah.
both in my job and outside of it, because some people who have never been homeless work in the system and they have bad takes, and that's why I'm here. So,
True, true,
yeah.
true. See, you were just exploiting your ex homelessness demographic to get ahead in the system.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. This is oh God, I can't even remember what it's called. Affirmative action.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm completely unqualified. I just happen to know a lot and be really good at it.
True, true, very true,
So
very
yeah,
true.
yeah.
No problem. Yeah, because
I'm
I mean
ready.
the reason why I don't know if you were tuning into the stream before, but the reason why this popped to my mind to have you given to call now is that we went on a kind of tangent earlier on in the stream where I was talking about how people always essentialize like systemic problems as they happen as to what people deserve and whether
Right.
something is deserved or not. So, for example, um, people have a sense of resentment towards the idea that somebody might get reparations they see are undeserved is part of a reparations package to be able to, fix systemic economic problems for Black Americans, right? And the allegory that I made was the same way in that people think that homeless people are homeless due to some just world fallacy that they did something that meant that they deserved to be there, right? And that is
Yeah.
poor thinking in two regards. First of all, because it completely dehumanizes homeless people, and second of all, because like this is not just. I mean, I hate to be a both sides from this issue, but it's not just an issue that affects homeless people. People don't like being in cities full of homeless people either. It's not only in the vested interest of homeless people to not be homeless as well. It's also in the vested interest of society at large to
Yeah.
make the streets better for everybody, and it's also cheaper as well, as far as from what I've seen, to just house homeless people. But it's this idea
Yeah.
of, well, we can't just give them a house because they don't deserve it, even though it leads to worse outcomes for everybody. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oh God, there were so many things. I'm gonna have to like take some notes and work through my thoughts. This is how I operate at work, where I just have a lot of thoughts and I have to go down them rapid
Yeah,
fire.
yeah, yeah.
But so yeah, I think just to start, as a really sort of basic thing, it is incredibly interesting the way that the just world fallacy plays out with homelessness, because we definitely see that, of course. But it's very specifically, everyone always says that people are homeless because of two things: mental illness or drugs. And it's fascinating, um, just on so many levels, that neither of those, unless you have just a horrible view of humanity, which some people do, I guess. Um, I'm not going to apologize for my cat meowing in the background as a heads up. She's
Is
beautiful
it
and I love
Miri?
her. Uh, yeah. But it's really interesting that it's like, oh, they deserve to be homeless because they're mentally ill, which is just a
Abhorrent,
really
yeah.
spaghetti brained take. Um, I can understand, and I don't want to conflate understand with agree, on the point of addiction, where many people feel addiction is a choice, and therefore, oh, you spent all your money on drugs instead of on rent, therefore you deserve this. Whereas I view the drug crisis as a public health crisis and as a type of mental illness, a type of disease in itself.
Mhm.
So again, it's just really interesting that the two main things that people use to justify homelessness are illness, um, and it doesn't even play out within the just world fallacy that they've done something to deserve it. Um, I do know that it does play out in other ways, because people assume all homeless people are criminals, and statistics can back that up. They don't, in many regards, but it's true that like homeless people are more likely to be arrested because the cops target them more.
Yeah.
And so it's a really self-fueling cycle of, these are shitty people. This guy robbed a store. That's why he deserves to be homeless. Which is, I don't know, maybe I'm putting words in people's mouths, but it does really seem to be a thing where when we see criminalization happen in cities, there's always an element of homeless people are drug dealers, homeless people are sex traffickers, homeless men attack women, those sorts of things, which aren't really grounded in reality. But Miri, get over here. What are you doing? All right. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. If I think about it too long, it just makes me really mad. Um,
I'm not
but
surprised.
yeah,
Look, there's this
yeah.
kind of cyclical like poverty crime issue that people just completely disregard. In that,
Mm-hmm.
on like a systemic level, if we like when you decrease poverty, you decrease criminality as well. And again, people are
Yeah,
just like, well, people deserve to be poor. And I'm like, well, you're just making society worse for everybody if you do that. Like
yeah,
if we think that welfare is undeserved as like an
yeah.
institution, it's people getting things that they don't deserve. You just create this self-fulfilling like paradigm where people stay within poverty forever and it makes society worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one thing I do, the other thing you brought up that I sort of want to half push back on,
Sure, sure.
is this idea that it's cheaper to house people. Because it's something, you hear a lot, and it is sort of technically true, um, and also sort of not. The first nuance is that it really shouldn't matter if it's cheaper, because nobody deserves to die on the street. Uh, and that's final, but obviously that's not going to convince everyone. But so when we say, it costs this much to provide someone with services when they're on the street, because they're more likely to end up in the ER, they're more likely to interact with police. It costs money to constantly destroy their belongings, those sorts of things. Those jobs don't just go away because someone, like, if if you have a city full of homeless people and a certain portion of them are going to the ER like every week because they can't access sustainable health care in a way that means they no longer have to keep going to the ER all the time. And then you house all of those people. It doesn't necessarily mean all the doctors and nurses are fired. It
Sure.
means that there are better services for everyone else because they're not overburdened. It doesn't necessarily mean cheaper, but it does mean more efficient, you know? And a lot of it also has to do with upfront cost. So recently, the city of Toronto released something, not like a public press release or anything, but it was put out there that they spent $3 million sweeping camps over the summer. And I think it was like to do some stupid number. I'm not going to say it, but like maybe 600 people, maybe.
Jesus.
Yeah. So like 30,000 Canadian dollars to sweep per person. And or it might have been like 60. No, I don't know. I'm making up bullshit. I'm bad at math when I'm not in the brain space for it. But what it did come down to is that it was cheaper in summer of 2021. If the world ended at the end of August, it was cheaper to sweep those people rather than house them. Because housing people requires a big upfront investment. And also with the cheaper thing and with people having to access the ER less, there is also a surge when people get housed because they're able to access things better. They start accessing things. And so there is an initial, like, it does cost more. But then when you get over that hump, that's when it becomes a lot easier because then people stabilize and they get the surgery on their leg or they are able to access a psychiatrist, those sorts of things.
The kind of the cyclical problems that end up happening, they tend to dissipate once you've got the basics met.
Yeah, but it does require that upfront investment, which a lot of people are not about. And it's been sort of one of those, I'm not going to say it's a good thing. I'll say, I don't know. I'm not going to place a values judgment on it, especially not before the eviction moratorium has ended. But there has been, because of COVID, because of COVID and a change in government, in America, at least, there has been a massive investment. Just recently, in my city, the county put $100 million towards homeless services. The city also put $100 million, so we've got an investment of $200 million to build housing, to buy housing. Whereas I think the thing that I preside over, which makes it seem like small potatoes in comparison, we run on a budget of like less than 20 million a year just for operating expenses. But the idea is to open up 3,000 new units to house 3,000 more people than we otherwise would. And so, yes, I know. Sorry, I'm talking to my cat again. And so, there is that idea of it does require this huge investment. It requires infrastructure. You need to hire more case managers and you need to pay them better for them to stay on the job. Social workers also need workers' rights in order to have your system function. And so all of that stuff, obviously when the eviction moratorium ends, I have no idea how that's going to play out. But right now, there is a significant investment, which is a change of pace. Because it's about being proactive and getting ahead. The number one thing, like the mayor of LA, said is that if he could do anything, it would be just address it earlier because it costs more and it's more difficult and it's longer to do that initial surge, the bigger the problem gets.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So the
I
longer
don't
you
know. I
wait
think I
before making
on a
that investment,
tangent
the
there.
worse it gets.
Yeah, exactly. The bigger that investment has to be, which is, you know, that delicious sort of catch-22.
Mm.
The other thing with making things happen is like NIMBYism, right? People are opposed to there being shelters in their neighborhoods. People are opposed to there being housing in their neighborhoods.
Hate these
And
people so
again,
much.
I think I have like slightly nuanced takes on this. I think being opposed to housing in your neighborhood is fucking stupid, and you're a bad myopic person. Uh,
So it's
if you
selfish. That's
oppose that,
just selfish. That's what it is. Just I do not want
it's
the price of my house to depreciate so that other people can have somewhere to live. Like that's literally it.
yeah, yeah, no, exactly correct. But then the other thing is with shelters, I sort of get it. I know I probably shouldn't like say that in case I don't know someone from my job somehow figures out I'm on here, but um people, so you know when you talk about crime and homelessness, part of it is because shelters generally come with increased police presence. So getting a shelter in your neighborhood could mean that police show up more, which people don't want because police don't prevent crime; they just bully people. Uh, I, I, I don't know. I have a lot more radical takes than that, but in the neighborhood I'm in, the police are here constantly, and yet things constantly happen, and it's because the police aren't helping anybody by repeatedly traumatizing them.
Well, yeah,
Um,
the US kind of police culture is completely fucked. Like we were
yeah.
watching a bunch of police videos on Chud Logic stream today, and
Ugh.
like the absolute fucking wide chasm of difference in the way they act between like US and UK police officers is crazy.
Yeah. No, I don't know if y'all saw the whole thing where it was with the George Floyd protests. The thing came out about how the cops in Philadelphia detained a black woman to do a photo op with her son.
I fucking
Um,
saw that. And what was it, $2 million lawsuit about it?
yeah. Yeah. Just insane.
Crazy. It was by the
Yeah.
union, wasn't it? It was by
I
the
don't know.
police union who did that.
Yep. Yeah. Oh God. There is nothing. There might be one thing worse than the police unions, and that's the chambers of commerce. But they go hand in hand.
Potato, potato. Yeah.
The fucking chambers of commerce. But the other thing is that, you know, when we do talk about crime and homelessness, there are studies that have been done, and so the vast majority of interpersonal violence happens between people who know each other. But when it does come to people who um, don't know each other experiencing interpersonal violence, you are slightly more likely to experience it from someone who falls into a demographic that is repeatedly traumatized. Uh, who knows why? You know, like that's sarcastic. I think if you improve people's lives, that changes. And it's
Yep,
actually
exactly.
been shown that conditions in shelters are so stressful that people who live in shelters are more likely to commit crimes than people who are homeless on the street. Because it
Interesting.
involves a lot of bouncing around. It involves
Hmm.
experiencing staff abuse. It
Hmm.
involves close quarters and a lack of privacy that people in tents do sort of have, you know?
Hmm.
Um, but
And at the end,
all of that changes.
sorry, I was going to say, and at the end
All
of
of
the
that
day, go
changes.
for it. Sorry.
I'm sorry. All of that changes when you house people
Yeah.
because people act out in response to stress. This is a known thing. And so, if you want crime in your neighborhood to go down and there are homeless people in your neighborhood, a really bad way to do it is to criminalize them, and a really great way to do it is to house them.
Yeah.
Um, and shelters are just like this intermediate band aid that cities love to invest in without ever providing an out. So people just rot there.
Yeah,
But
because it
yeah.
sounds like you're doing something really good. It sounds like you're saying, well, these people are on the street, let's get them off the street. It sounds like you're at least trying to interact with the problem, which is what people want at the end of the day. But it doesn't
Hmm.
change things properly on a structural basis.
Right. And
There's
it's
also
one
someone,
of those things.
just quickly, someone in chat is asking, what is it that the chambers of commerce do that you dislike, or that's particularly
Oh
bad?
God. Um, yeah, so chambers of commerce. So the first thing is that they are the Illuminati. Uh, um, I don't actually believe in the Illuminati, but like frankly, they're pretty close. Um, they position themselves as a government entity, but they are not. They are essentially the union for business owners, especially smaller business owners who have something to lose if workers unionize and get higher pay, and have more rights. The Chamber of Commerce exists to quash any legislation that provides workers' rights. Um, and so, just having worked with them, some of their solutions to homelessness were put everyone under a big FEMA tent. Um, Let me think. I don't think I can think of anything else off the top of my head. That one was just it was a lot. Um,
Yeah.
but when we talk about um, yeah, it's the union for shitty bosses. Uh, and
That's
a
exactly
lot
what
of
they
what
needed.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, no. It's the union for union busters. Which is also what the police union is.
True,
Um,
true.
it's just incredible. Um, no, I'm a little brain fried because I was just writing cover letters. Uh, but if you want to know more about chambers of commerce, feel free to look it up. I'm pretty sure the LGBT Chamber of Commerce. I'm gonna look this up now.
Oh god, no! Is it like a girl boss chambers of commerce
Uh,
basically?
the NGLCC, which stands for the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and you'll notice that the acronym doesn't line up, and the T is removed, um, despite being in the full name. Um,
Not
that
surprised
that just
then.
that just sums it up.
Yeah.
They are inherently for right wingers. Um, I could see arguments in favor of like, the Black Business Owners Chamber of
Hmm.
Commerce, maybe, but it's inherently anti-workers' rights.
Yeah.
Um, there's not much more I can say about it.
Sure, sure.
uh,
The other question I was going to ask as well was there was a recent piece of legislation in Texas, um, some proposition that was basically just like
oh yeah,
NIMBYs, people voting against the homeless rights. But I've forgotten the ins and outs of that
yeah,
particular bill. But what do you mind going over
yes,
that and your thoughts about it?
yeah. All right, you've outed me. I'm from Austin. That's where it happened.
Oh, really? Was it? Okay,
Um,
I didn't realize it's in in your actual place of residence.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's where it happened. So, for context, there were two things happening. One, so anytime Austin tries to do anything progressive, the state says, no, no, we like small government, uh, but not like that. So, we're going to legislate you out of being able to do that. So, in 2019, Austin decriminalized camping. Um, they made it legal to do so. Um, Obviously, not like in front of businesses. There were like some very basic measures put in place, but really made it pretty okay. It was a really good step. Um, and they did it right after the legislative session. And the Texas state legislature meets only every 2 years because I don't know. I guess the world stops moving in between those sessions, but
That's how long it
um,
takes to get them through the edges of Texas to back into the mid wherever they're gonna meet. 'Cause it's fucking massive.
yeah,
Walking.
I think it is the culture war cycle. Like, this legislative session, it was critical race theory and trans kids. And then in 2 years, like God only knows, there will be some Islamophobic legislation and all of that.
Yeah.
But so the state was gearing up to do their own thing to make it illegal across the state to allow camping. So I don't know, that was a thing. But the GOP in Austin partnered with the police union and said, we'll do you one better. That's not good enough. We need to assert ourselves within this city. We recently got someone on the city council. So, we're going to flex our muscles. And they came up with legislation, a policy that they duped people into signing onto by claiming it was something else, which they've done again. I
Was it
can
one of
get
those
into
bills? Was it one of those bills where it's essentially the name of the bill is something completely different, and then they just kind of smuggle a bunch of legislation underneath, like the title?
It wasn't even. It was people standing with clipboards outside the public library on the street, being like, "Hey, do you want to help the homeless?" And it was framed very
Serious.
much as, if we criminalize it, it'll make the city do something, which is bizarre and backwards. I can go into why that's wrong if people need me to, but it logically doesn't really pan out. But
No.
so yeah, they came up with Proposition B, which made it illegal to camp anywhere in Austin. It also made it illegal to sit on the sidewalk, to lie down on the street, punishable by a $500 fine. So I call it the "it now costs $500 to sit down" bill.
What even is that?
And yeah, no, it is truly bizarre. And
Only
inevitably what
only in
happens.
Texas.
Oh yeah, no, of course. It really is. It's very specifically Texas. So what inevitably happens is people get, a $500 fine. They don't show up to the court date. They get a warrant, and then they're in jail, right? Because they can't pay $500. This is what happened last time there was a camping ban, and now it's also just for sitting, which is great. I love that. Go GOP.
Woo.
And a ton of liberal voters voted for it, because they're cucks, and NIMBYs, and they moved here from California to get away from homeless people. Even though the fact that it's their fault when homeless populations rise where they move, because they move into cities, boot people out of their housing by offering to pay more, and then oppose more housing, and then complain that people are homeless wherever they live. If they moved to Pittsburgh, the same exact thing would have happened.
Yes, they drive up the housing prices within a. They drive up the housing demand, sorry, and then keep the supply inelastic or static in this
Yeah,
particular case. If they keep blocking legislation for new housing, the supply just becomes static, and then there's just more people than there are houses.
yeah, and the insanest shit, is that the zoning laws in Austin are so completely outdated. The minimum lot size for a single family residence is 3,600 feet. That is the minimum lot size for a one family home. It's just absolutely insane. I don't
Sounds
know if that
huge.
means anything to anyone, but in Philadelphia, you can fit 3 houses in that. So, and in the UK, you can probably fit like 12, because the UK is tiny,
It's true. It's
as far as
true.
apartment sizes go. But um, yeah, and so basically people were like, how come there are homeless people everywhere? I kick people out of their housing and take their place and then refuse to let them live near me. I know
Why
what
is
I
it
should do. I
everywhere
should
that we
oppose.
gentrify?
Yeah, exactly. And so they were like, I know. I'm going to be compassionate by making the city come up with a solution, accept all of the solutions that they've said, because I oppose all of them, because they involve me having to live near the people that I booted. I'm going to make the city come up with some imaginary solution, which I inevitably will not support, by making it cost $500 to sit down. And lo and behold, Austin passed it because it's a hellscape. But also because
yeah, because even like affluent, because like even affluent liberals are all NIMBYs as well. Like it's not a conservative issue
oh
at all.
yeah,
It's not. I mean, obviously, the GOP proposed the bill because they're heartless cunts, but like
yeah.
they still garner plenty of support from these initiatives from cosmopolitan middle class liberals as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and it's you can see if you look at a heat map of how people voted in Austin on this legislation. Austin has not, and I don't know if it will soon. Maybe I don't know if it ever will recover from the intense redlining that occurred in the 20th century, where
No,
the
quite.
city was. They literally built a highway to say that Black people have to live on one side of it. But if you look at the heat map of the geographic distribution of votes, it's entirely one side of the city and downtown, people who can afford to live downtown who voted in favor of it, and the other side of the city that voted against it. And the fact that there wasn't early voting in some locations, predominantly the poor ones, maybe only the poor ones. I'm not going to say that, but um, voting was not as easy for poor people. It never is. And that's how it got passed. It
I find it
was
very strange how in the US a load of these kind of bills get put essentially to referenda. It makes no sense to me. Like the whole
yeah,
point of representative democracy is it means that you get people who know better than you do to be able to decide on these things. But again, then I guess in this particular instance, because the GOP have basically monopolistic control over all of the institutions in Texas already, whether it was a referendum or
yeah,
not, it still would end up passing.
yeah. Well, Prop B might not have. That was very specifically Austin, and the
Mm.
entire city council, aside from the one conservative sitting on it, were opposed to it.
Oh,
But
blimey.
the state legislation absolutely 100% would have.
Yeah.
So it would have still been illegal to have a tent. It would have still been illegal to protect yourself from the elements and have a place to store your belongings. It would have been slightly less illegal to simply exist downtown.
Sit
Uh,
down. There's
but
no sitting, no lying.
yeah, it's just
It's fucked up.
Jesus Christ, if I can pronounce the word, unfathomably evil.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. And so now they're currently doing a thing, Prop A for the November election, ballot election, where they have told people that they're in favor of police reform. Therefore, we should increase the police budget by like some absurd number, because it costs money to hold police accountable by giving the money to the police.
It also gets paid on settlements.
And
Like this money, the amount of money
yeah,
that the US states just spaff away
oh god,
paying settlements rather than
yeah,
just training their fucking officers is crazy.
yeah. No, it's we love good old American democracy. We do not invest in things proactively. We just pay out the ass when everything sucks.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, so that's I don't know. That's coming up in November. I'm super excited to
Fun, fun,
get really
fun.
mad about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we'll have you on. I'll have you on when it's going on there as well. We can chat about it. We can chat about that too, whether it passes or not.
Yeah.
We can see what the
I'm
impacts of that are going to be.
I'm slightly more hopeful about this because I think what the GOP doesn't count on is that if there's one thing liberals hate more than homeless people, it's police. Um, I think even liberals are not in favor of bolstering police presence, especially after last year.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
but who knows? We'll see.
public opinion's definitely soured since basically images of police brutality just continuously went viral for like a period of 12 months. Even now, to be
Yeah.
fair, even now.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. But yeah, fun stuff.
What's crazy to me as well is that you don't have like particularly good public housing initiatives in general in the United States. Is it Section
Mm.
8 housing you call over there?
Yeah. I know that I have these credentials. I don't know exactly what qualifies as Section 8 housing and what
Yeah.
isn't. Um, I know that like a lot of what we are looking into right now is refurbishing hotels, like buying the land,
Mm.
and then refurbishing the hotels to put, um, a fully functioning kitchen and all of that stuff in each room. And I believe it also involves like breaking a couple walls down to make them bigger into actual apartments.
Mm-hmm.
But it's essentially DIY apartment building, but without having to build from the ground up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that would qualify as Section 8 housing specifically. I assume Section 8 is a specific funding stream. And if the funding is coming from the city government or the county, it might be different.
Let me
But
just do a cursory Google search to find
yeah,
out what's going on there,
it's
because yeah, my PC is listening to me immediately to ask, "Do you want to search for Section 8?" And I'm like, "Excuse me, sorry." There's a prerequisite for the landlord of
incredible.
a assured tenancy or assured short-held tenancy wish to obtain possession order from the court. Wait, Section 8 is an eviction. Sorry, um, that's Section 8
Hmm.
notices. That's what that is. Sorry, I'm thinking of. I was thinking of like public housing initiatives because it's crazy to me that when I come from a country where essentially after the war, the government just spent a bunch of public money building a bunch of houses that the government owned, and then
Yep.
everyone just had houses. They would just give if you couldn't afford to live privately, you just were assigned a council house. They were all built to exactly the same specifications, sprawling across the country. There was tens and
Mhm.
hundreds of thousands of these things built, and they're still livable today. Like I live in a council house from the 30s that was built in the 30s as well, so even earlier than that. Um, and
Yeah.
the government just said, oh, we're going to spend a bunch of money, and that just doesn't happen in the United States. What happens in the United States is kind of what happens now. In that in the UK now, the government just has a housing welfare budget where there's
Yeah.
people who can't afford to live in rented accommodation, so the government just pays landlords to house these people. It's essentially just like a private contract being given out towards landlords because the market doesn't support their existence, right? The government is
Yeah.
subsidizing the existence of private landlords rather than say using all that money to buy a bunch of real estate, housing people on the cheap, which would keep the asset
Yeah.
within the public sphere and be cheaper in the long run.
Mhm. Yeah, correct. It's one of those things that I've advocated really hard for here, um, that specifically we need city-owned housing, not city-rented housing.
Hmm.
I think there have been studies that show that, like, landlords, when the city or the government is paying a private landlord, landlords upcharge the fuck out of a place, because they know, the government will pay to house someone. Um, and it ends up meaning less people are housed. Um, and also, it means that when there are fluctuations in the market, um, as in, a bunch of people move here from California because they're sick of homeless people, and also they have to pay less taxes. Um, then suddenly the city is left floundering because the way it budgeted money to help people with rent is no longer nearly enough. Um, it's just such a terrible idea. Uh, just build public housing. If I can like change zoning laws, improve density, and build public housing. That's the gist of my politics when it comes to housing.
Same.
It doesn't work for everyone. I think that housing should be a buffet that people can choose from. Some people want an apartment near downtown, and some people want to live out in the boondocks, and there should be opportunities for both of them.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but until we can achieve that utopia, just like for the love of God, quit it with the insane archaic zoning laws that were built to keep black people out of your neighborhood. and just public fucking housing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just tell the NIMBYs to get bent. Tell them, no, sorry,
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
give a shit. I don't give a shit if your house
yeah.
price is going to go down. We have a bunch of people who need housing, and we're going to put an apartment block across the road. Tough shit. Like,
It's also like we can give a shit if their house price is going to go down because it doesn't. Like when you build housing for people to live in your neighborhood, your housing will go up because then you don't have a bunch of people living on the street in front of your building,
yeah,
you know? Like wherever housing is built, we don't see property values go down. It doesn't happen. It's a fake boogeyman that people made up because they are scared of change. Um, and I have, a degree of sympathy, like especially right now when it's so difficult to buy a home, where like a lot of people who grew up middle class are experiencing like pretty severe downward economic mobility
hmm,
and like buying a house, like you want to be able to hold on to that house. Um, but like treating it like an investment and making the world worse for everyone else so that it can be an investment rather than simply the place you fucking live. Uh, that's the line where I'm like, we're gonna have to agree that we do not see the world the same way.
yeah,
Um,
exactly, exactly. The endless commodification of basic necessities, especially within a market such as housing, where increasing the supply is very difficult, or at least not even at least it's intentionally difficult at the moment, but also just a slow process. You can't just
yeah,
like
well,
build housing overnight, can you?
there is some level of inherent inelasticity in building housing because the issue isn't building housing, it's geographic dispersion.
Hmm,
Because when you see people talk about there are more homeless people in America, there are less homeless people in America than empty homes.
hmm.
Um, it's like, where are the empty homes? And it's like, they're in fucking bumfuck West Virginia, bumfuck South Dakota. Like, it's not because there are a billion empty homes in Austin just waiting for people to move in, you know? Um, and so one of the main things is that, when I stress public housing, the first thing I stress is changing zoning laws before you build that public housing, because what costs money is land. It's why like community land trusts are such a big deal. Um, the actual materials of building a house and hiring the contractors, obviously it costs money. I'm not saying like, oh yeah, just like hire a contractor, build a house in the middle of a field.
Hmm.
Um, but the main issue is location. And there is something to balance where when housing becomes too dense, um, more crime occurs in areas where there's less visibility. That's just inherent. I want to say that's just inherent. It's been too long since I've read up on it, and I might be sort of blindly following someone who just thinks that because they fail to realize that denser locations tend to be poorer and all that comes with that. But there is only so much density you can do before it does have some level of detrimental effect. I'm not like 100% gung ho, just make it dense forever, like, 100-story apartment buildings. Uh, but like, by God, we can be doing so much better, you know?
Yeah, like I mean,
Um,
and it's not this dichotomy between only apartment blocks or only suburban areas, right? There's
yeah.
townhouses and things like that. Bits there's like
Yes.
stages in between where we can section things out. It's just if you were
Mhm.
going to try and just build like these urban sprawl suburban hellscapes, that wouldn't work if you're going to
Mhm.
try and do that, right? I get what you mean there. I get what you mean. I think this
Yeah.
the big issue is this general transition towards a service economy, both in the UK and in the US, has led to the
Mm.
necessity for people entering the workforce to move to big cities and out of the places you stay with a bunch of empty homes and
Mhm.
like bumblefuck nowheresville. Because to be able to get a job, you have to go in the central business districts to perform these service roles for bigger swathes of the population, right? Because it's not
Mhm.
one to one. The bigger like you don't just 5 people doesn't equal one server in every single place, right? As the populations get larger, it exponentially gets more difficult to be able to provide the service roles for those people as well.
Yeah.
And so
It's
people are being forced to move to big cities, and there's just not the housing space because they have to participate in the economy somehow.
yeah. No, it's horrible. The one thing I will say, like, if I can do like one bit of good news, the best news I've had this month, is that California recently made single family zoning illegal. Like, there's no more in the future. So it's duplexes at a minimum, which isn't like, that doesn't ensure, massive density, but like it's an incredible piece of legislation from my perspective.
Hmm.
Um, because like right now I'm in the process of moving, and one of the things that's important to me is having a yard, which in theory could make me a hypocrite, but I'm not opposed to people having access to nature. Um,
Exactly.
it's just about 3,600 feet for one family of three to live on is just, my God, you know? Um, we don't need 1,200 feet per person.
Yeah.
That's just unnecessary. I lived in an 800-foot apartment and felt like I had too much space on my own. Um, so, yeah, I'm just so in love with no more single family zoning. I'm so obsessed with it. I just want it to happen everywhere.
Yeah.
Duplexes only from now
So I think just lots of people are
on.
just the problem is that the vast majority of the politically engaged class in the United States is just like they've just got their heads buried in the sand. They're just completely
Oh yeah,
oblivious to the huge issues of the housing crisis, especially because most of them are just a bunch of kind of like middling, reasonably well-off white families who got on the property ladder in the 20s and 30s. Who've
yeah,
continued that particular paradigm forever throughout all of the generations that they've lived through, passing down intergenerational wealth from person to person, right? Um, and they just don't
yeah.
see
It's
it.
it's boomers. It's the same people who think that like young people complaining about wages are silly because they were able to pay their way through college.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
it's like
The
the world is a little different now, bud.
exactly
Uh,
the way the economy is structured now is just fucking is stratospherically different. It's crazy different to the way it was previously.
yeah,
The way the economy's changed, it's changed from manufacturing to service. Houses are now 10 times the median wage rather than 4 times the median wage. Wages haven't increased
yeah,
with productivity. Minimum wage in the federal minimum wage hasn't increased in 2 decades in the United States. Like
yeah.
compared to the way the costs of living have risen, the money we have
Thank
to
you.
spend on it, the money we have to spend on additional stuff, is
Yeah,
higher than like the cost of living in general, but also like the live service model. If you want to engage with things at our leisure time is now paid by the hour rather than a
yeah,
commodity that gets bought and sold, right? And if we stop paying, we stop having access to it. Just
yeah,
crazy. It's stupid. But then again, it's another way of
yeah.
sucking up as much money. I was watching a video by a Tory peer in the House of Lords doing a video about how young people have been fucked over by the Tories, no doubt. And he was saying that he would pulled up a graph saying that millennials spend less on non-housing consumption than every single other generation. So even
Yep.
boomers who say that they scrimp and save and they don't frivolously buy Nintendo Switches and iPhones and whatever, what have you, even these people spend
Yeah.
more than we do.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean,
It's like,
likewise.
have you seen those like articles where it's like one article is like millennials are eating out less, they're killing the restaurant industry, and also millennials are buying food from grocery stores less, and it's just like, are millennials starving? Like,
It's literally
it's like,
why aren't millennials buying diamonds? Why are millennials
yeah.
trying to kill the yacht industry? And I'm like, we've got no fucking money. None of us have any money. Just because you've
Oh,
seen some
it's
Instagram influencer flaunting some wealthy lifestyle on the internet, that doesn't make it somehow endemic to the culture of millennials in general.
yeah. No. And obviously, Instagram influencers are solely responsible for keeping various industries afloat.
True,
So
true, true.
good
I
on
mean,
them. Good
it's,
on
it's
them.
yeah, quite so, quite so. And they tell at least these people tend to spend their money at the very least. The problem that we have a lot of the time in the economy at the moment is just people who don't spend any money. All they do is just accumulate. Fucking
Yeah.
landlords for one of them. They don't spend their money. They just accumulate into, just put it into more and more assets.
Yeah. I think one of the bits that I enjoy doing um, is is it illogical to accumulate money that you have no intent to spend? And so
Yeah.
the answer is yes. And then is doing illogical things repeatedly a sign of mental illness in some regard? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And then it's okay. So being anti-landlord and anti-billionaires is ableist. You're an ableist.
True, true. This is the woke pro landlord stance that we needed to start adopting.
Addiction is a public health crisis, and addiction to money, it's a disease. There's a disease
True,
model.
true.
Bring it full circle. Yeah. Um, I have to go talk with my friends about uh, trying to find a place to live. Very
No
on
worries.
topic.
Well, thank you very much for
Yeah,
coming
I
on anyway. I
appreciate
really
it.
do appreciate it.
Yeah, I had a blast. I love bitching about how shit things are. It's a very good time. But no more single family zoning, higher density, buy
Yeah,
public housing.
yeah, 100%, absolutely. It's what we need to do. More public housing is it's the long and short of it, because you cannot trust the private sector to do it, because it's not within their interest to do so. Why would they increase the supply of something they have a monopoly on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can recommend a book before I bounce,
Hmm.
one of the books that like really I was already aware of things because obviously this is like my field and also my life. But the book Evicted by Matthew Desmond um, just like provides one of the most cogent and also pathos driven arguments in favor of massively expanding public housing in the United States. So,
Hmm.
my recommended read. But yeah, thank you for having me. Party
No,
on.
yeah, absolutely. Party on, summer. It's been an absolute pleasure. And to be fair, it's like 11 p.m. now, so it's quite late already. And I've been streaming. I've been streaming for 3.5 hours now. So,
Oh my God. Yeah, God
look,
bless. Have fun in Cyprus.
I will absolutely have plenty of fun in Cyprus. I'm gonna have great fun doing fuck all, because work has been incredibly stressful and tiring, and I am desperate for the break.
Correct. All right. Good night.
No problems. You take care. And